All right, I'm here with Megan Gower of Her Hoops Stats ahead of Selection Sunday on Sunday. We're so excited to see where everybody lands in the bracket. First of all, Megan, for people who may not know, what is Her Hoops, and what do you guys do throughout the season, especially this time of year?
Yeah, so we're a women's basketball statistics site. So we have rankings, statistics data for all of Division One as well as the Division Two, Division Three, WNBA on the website. And then we also do a lot of different coverage of women's college basketball, particularly what we're talking about today, bracketology. So we've got our own bracketology up on the website, updating it every day right now until we get till Selection Sunday.
Yeah, it's such a great site. You guys do such a great job. I look at it all the time. So if you guys are women's basketball fans watching this and you want every stat you can think of and all the insights, Her Hoops is such a great place for that. But obviously in Columbia, we talk about South Carolina the majority of the time, and we're getting ready for a big Sunday. So when it comes to Selection Sunday, Megan, the number one overall seed seems to be coming down to between UCLA and South Carolina. What do you think is going to be the biggest difference and the big decision that the committee is going to use to decide who is the number one overall seed?
Yeah, I think it's a close call. I think both of these teams obviously have had fantastic seasons. Both came out on top in their conference tournaments last weekend, and it really is down to these two in terms of who's going to get that number one overall spot. I think there's kind of a handful of things to look at here, but UCLA, I think, has the edge in terms of the losses. They have only had two losses this season, both to USC, which they then avenged in the conference tournament, South Carolina with three. But then South Carolina has a deeper resume of quality wins in terms of the SEC being so strong this year. And they've just been able to pick up so many wins over the kind of maybe not the top tier of teams, but that next tier of teams that the committee is going to be looking at. Ultimately, I think it's likely to be UCLA in that top overall spot. And the thing that puts me there is just looking 2 weeks ago, we got a preview from the committee of what the bracket looked like at a snapshot in time then. And that was following South Carolina's loss to UConn. And they had dropped South Carolina down to a two seed as of that. So there was clearly a large reaction to that loss to UConn and the magnitude of that loss. I think South Carolina's kind of way they finished out the season and this win over Texas in the SEC final definitely helps push them back up. And that's why we've been talking about them in this conversation. But I think all the way back to the number one overall seed is maybe a little bit too much room to cover in 2 weeks.
So do you see them being the number two, number one in this situation?
Exactly. I see them. I think it is between UCLA and them, as I said, and I think UCLA gets that top spot, but South Carolina will be the number two overall. So the second number one.
So when you look at the bracket, because you guys really kind of showed the entire bracket of what you think it's going to play out on Sunday. What are the other top teams that you see being in South Carolina's region as the number two, number one seed?
Yeah, the other top seeds in the region, I have TCU as the number two seed in the region after they won their conference tournament over Baylor last weekend. Duke as the number three seed, which won the ACC championship, and then Ohio State in the number four spot. Um, so I think that's probably the group. Obviously, when one thing changes in the committee's S curve versus your projection, that can move everything. But I think that's probably a good snapshot of what that group could be.
And when you think of South Carolina, the obviously defending national champions, obviously last year there was so much attention on them going for the perfect season, which they ultimately did. What do you think they're going to have to do to repeat as champions, which we haven't seen since 2016?
Yeah, I think for them, a lot of what they did this weekend and continuing that, I think Clint Kitts was fantastic for South Carolina this past weekend. They got a lot of production from their bench as they usually do, but continuing on that and just really riding the way that they played in the SEC tournament into the NCAA tournament. This team is obviously one of the top teams in the country. They're maybe not have the largest or their margin for error is a little smaller than it has been in the past few years, but I still think they've got all the pieces to win a national championship. It's just continuing to play your best basketball in March.
Yeah, it really felt like all the pieces were coming together at the SEC tournament and everyone started to really understand their roles on this team. Now, we think a big picture of the entire bracket. Who are some of the dark horses that you see being effective in March?
Yeah, I think it depends how you label dark horse because in the women's tournament, I tend to go more in like that 5 to 7 seed range in terms of teams because I mean, I think there are some double digit seeds that could make a run, but For me, on the four line, Baylor's someone that I'm really looking at. They came really close with TCU in that Big 12 championship. They've been without Little Paige Bugs for a few weeks now and still playing really well. So if they get her back, I think that's a team that's not getting as much attention that could make a big run, maybe even a Final Four type run. Tennessee, who South Carolina has obviously seen this season, didn't have the greatest finish to the regular season, but we've kind of seen that they can beat anyone this season with their style of play. So a team I'd keep an eye on. And then going a little further down to some of the names you don't hear as much, I think in the mid-major conferences, a South Dakota State team that's really experienced, been really good all season long, kind of flies under the radar. But they are, I think, in the top 25 right now, and a team that I would keep an eye on, as well as Richmond out of the A10.
Awesome. Well, is there anything else you want to add about what you're expecting on Sunday? Anything that people should keep their eye out on when it comes to the bracket reveal on Sunday? I'll kind of leave the end of this conversation to you.
I mean, I think I'm just excited to see what the field looks like. We've talked so much, I think, as a whole in women's basketball this season about how there's so much more parity and this season, and I think the matchups are going to matter a lot this season as to who's going to make Final Four, who's going to win it all. So I'm excited to see what those matchups are.
Well, if you are a South Carolina fan and you see TCU as the two seed, I think you have to be happy about that, and Duke as the three, considering they beat both of those teams. So if that bracket does come true and these projections play out, I think South Carolina would be pretty happy with that on Sunday. But Megan, thank you so much for joining us. I really, really appreciate it. Your insight is great, and again, Her Hoops does such a great job. I look at it all the time. So again, if you're a women's basketball fan and you guys want to see how everything's playing now with South Carolina and every other team in the country, go to Her Hoops. Megan, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. And I know we'll probably see you at the tournament sometime, I'm assuming.
Yes, yes, likely. Well, thanks for having me, Matt.